right.
Let's do this.
Well, hey, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Morning Startup. My name is Scott Glue.
I'm Dave Newman, and we've been doing this since
2011?
2011.
Yeah.
Rain or shine, every 2 weeks we meet here, and we have awesome presenters as we're going to have today. And we have a format.
Yes, we do indeed. Well, we talk about startup stuff. If you haven't, who hasn't been to Morning Startup before? All right, cool. Are you guys in the startup space? Thinking about starting a company? No? You just want to learn how to code today? Or maybe you know how to code and just want to give Dale crap. All right. Awesome. So what we'd like to do is, if you are new, or if you have an announcement, or you're working on something cool and you want people to know about it, this is your time to shine. If you want to give a bit of a shameless plug, let people know you exist. We also have a live stream, so welcome everyone on the live stream. I know we have a new event up in Joondalup, so they're doing a watch party, thanks to the city of Joondalup at the Ready Software offices, so hello.
Hello. Joondalup's regional now, is it?
Sorry.
Joondalup's regional now, is it?
Yes, it's streamed for the regions up there. So who wants to go first? All right.
Hi everyone, I'm new to Perth. My name is Matt. I'm originally from Sydney, spent some time in Tokyo. Anyway, just wanted to talk about, we've got a new meetup starting next week. Our first event is called Why a Growth Mindset, labelled Founder Fundamentals. I'm doing it with my lovely partner here, Jason. And it's our first event. It's an online event. It's at 12 p.m. on Wednesday next week. So it's all about why a growth mindset. We'll be doing hybrid events, so we'll be doing some in person, some online, but this is our first one. So if you do come, please be nice to us. It's our first one. But just wanted to say hi to everyone and introduce the event. So please come along if you're interested.
How do they find it?
You can connect to me on LinkedIn. Come and see me after the event. I'll give you a business card. We can talk about it from there. Otherwise, come find me on LinkedIn, Matt Ainsworth. You can also find the meetup group. It's Startup Founder Mindset Group Perth. So.
Perfect.
All right. Startup Founder Mindset Group Perth on meetup.com. Anyone else? Awesome.
Hi guys, I have been here before, but we are launching a new software development company at the end of the month called Software for You. We are from South Africa, so we are branching out to Australia, and we are looking for clients, anyone who's looking to develop anything or looking for good developers. So please reach out to me at the end of the event if you'd like to catch up. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome.
Anyone else? No? Cool.
No more shameless.
Who's got a startup here, just out of interest? Yeah? And who's actually thinking of doing a startup? No? Yeah. Okay. Bit of a lower crowd this week, but we'll see. We'll work on them. We'll work on them.
All right. So, there's a bit of a delay. All right, cool. So we do this every 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, this is our shameless plug for the next event. WA has 3 new venture capital firms, becoming venture capital firms, on their way, because they've been funded by the WA government thanks to the New Industries Fund. They get 100 grand for the next.
I think it's 100 grand a year. It's basically WA government's recognised the fact that we are pretty capital poor over here when it comes to being able to get hold of VCs. We see all the VCs come from over east trying to take all the money from the high net worths we've got here. So they've said, look, we're going to create 3 new, or help, not create is the wrong word, but we're going to help support 3 new I won't use the word VCs. Definitely one of them is a VC for sure. But we're essentially going to help 3 new mechanisms for raising capital here in WA. They are obviously Purpose Ventures, run by Derek Gerard, as we know and love him from Plus8, and Better Labs. Obviously, there's Peer and then Nigel from Fund WA and Quokka. And so essentially the government's gone, we will pay for the cost of you operating a fund here in WA, but part of that is you have to invest in WA companies. So if you want to learn more about it, go and Google WAVE, I think it was called, wasn't it? Was it the WAVE program?
Yeah, WAVE's funding.
Yeah, and you can basically find some more. But we will have these 3 in a fireside session run by myself in 2 weeks because Mr. Glue is going to the UK for some reason.
Yeah, so I won't be at the next one. Dave will be running it solo, legend.
Then it's my turn to go to the UK.
Should be fun. Come along.
Yeah,
come and meet them, especially if you're looking at raising
money.
And
they've got, like I said, they've got some good money. So I think they're looking to really invest in WA startups if you are looking to get that funding.
All right. Does anyone like drinking beer in a pub? We do Founder Sundowner on the first Wednesday of every month. So come along. Happy people. It's good night out. The next one's not for a few weeks. First Wednesday of every month. Okay. We do...
Failed. Sorry, Ammo.
Sorry, Cam.
Sorry.
Cam called me today to say, where was my banner in the last meetup?
Where was it? It's not around there.
Okay, so we usually have a pull-up banner for Ammo. Apologies.
It is
Ammo.
here. It's just invisible.
Ammo, they're a marketing agency. They're really, really awesome. They know the shit around growth marketing. So please get in touch at ammo.marketing. They also have a really cool podcast called Weird Growth. So if you can do anything today, one is subscribe to us on LinkedIn and YouTube and all that stuff, but make sure you get on to Weird Growth.
Podcast. Beecham Group. Finally, Glenn is in the room in the back there. Finally, he's been a stranger for many weeks, but Glenn is here. If you are looking for your next job, or you are looking to recruit your next developer or your next marketer, check out Glenn and the team from beechamgroup.com. They're more than happy to help you, or at least advise you as to what's going on in the marketplace.
And keep space. So we're going to have about half an hour of networking at the end of the talk today. There's some food at the back. That's kind of expensive for us running this as a volunteer thing. So Keep Space have kindly supplied food at this meetup. And in return, we're telling you all about Keep Space. Who's in e-commerce? Anyone shipping things around?
No?
None in the room? Well, if you do, Keep Space. They have a warehouse here in Perth and a warehouse over in Melbourne, and a really cool online platform to help you manage all of that stuff and ship stuff to customers better and faster and cheaper and all that stuff.
Brilliant. It's funny because the last meetup there was like literally half the room were e-commerce people, so it's funny how we get the different mix.
That's right.
And a massive thanks to the New Industries Fund. They've kindly sponsored us to stream this out to the different regions. Like I say, hi to Yanchep, hi to Joondalup and different areas that we've got watching this on streaming. It wouldn't be possible without the New Industries Fund. And also, just to let you know, what is the time?
It's 22.
22. So you've got exactly 3 hours and 20 minutes in which to submit your Innovation Booster Grant, as that will close today at 11 o'clock. So for those of you who are not aware of it, basically the government has redone the Innovation Booster Grant, and essentially it's 40 grand this year, and it's 20 grand up front straight away, and then 20 grand at the end. But the deadline is in 3 hours. So if you're that good, get it in. But if not, you've got to wait until next year, unfortunately.
All right, cool. And obviously a bunch of supportive organisations that make the ecosystem around startups work in WA. Space Cubed, obviously, been Startup Central, really gathering everyone together for the last 10 years or so. If you don't know Space Cube, they run this place, as well as Fern and Flux down the road, and a whole bunch of co-working spaces popping up around the country. So thank you to Brodie and the guys at Space Cube.
If you haven't subscribe to Startup News. Every Friday comes out a bit of information. Subscribe to their Facebook page as well, and also their LinkedIn. They'll give you articles throughout the week and what's going on in the startup scene. So if you're slightly disconnected like I am from what's happening, then it's a great way to see what other awesome stuff is going on here in WA. Plus 8 is WA's accelerator. I think they've just started Sprint, or they're starting Sprint, but there is Plus 8, the main accelerator, will be opening in a few weeks. I think there'll be some news coming out, that's for sure, because I think it's going to start in May time. I think that's okay. So by the time they've selected, must be around this time they'll advertise. But essentially, Plus 8, the normal accelerator is essentially it's a 6-month program where you can get. I think last year most of the companies got about 80 grand. And
They take you through a whole program to teach you to be a better entrepreneur and send you to Silicon Valley, potentially. Where are they sending you?
no, Singapore.
Singapore,
But Silicon Valley's gone now, you know. Hopefully none of you had money in SVB.
Right, and Startup WA, if you have an issue and you want the government to know about it in startup land, hit up the guys at Startup WA. They're our sort of voice to local state government. And Tech Board, they put out funding reports all the time, so make sure you subscribe to Tech Board and you'll get aware of who's getting funded and who's not in town. And also, if you have an announcement, chuck it on Tech Board and that'll go out to their investor-heavy focused audience. Cool. All right. Get in touch with us. Love to hear from you. If you're looking at speaking one day or have something interesting that the Perth startup community want to hear, we're happy to circulate that news. We're Morning Startup on all the things. And that's formalities out of the way. All right. So today,
that's a proper dad joke. That is a proper. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you. Been playing that one for ages. Yeah, cool. Yeah. There we go. Come on, you silly. Yeah, okay. Anyway, I'm moving over to Dale. So Dale has been coming to Morning Startup for 6 months or so, I think. Super switched on guy. He was like, can I do a presentation? Because I think people in the startup space should really learn some coding chops because it helps, you know, whether you're going to implement the thing yourself if you've got an idea or just so you can communicate better with developers. Really good skills to have. He learned to code in 6 months, which is pretty short time frame, and he's going to tell you how you could probably do it too. So please make him welcome, Dale Murugan.
Thank you. Just going to set up my slides, so give me 2 minutes.
Shit, I just drank your water. I'll give you another one.
That's all right. Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for waking up extra early to come to this morning. I personally find it hard waking up at 9 a.m. for my 9:15 stand-up, so I appreciate all of you that made your way here. And a special shout out to my senior developer, Tim, because he also struggles to wake up at 9 a.m. just like me. So I appreciate you all for coming out. Reason for my talk this morning is because I've been coming to these events for the past 6 months, like Scott has mentioned, and I've talked to a lot of sort of aspiring founders who have great ideas that often involve like an online platform or an application. And one of the main things that they say is, look, I've got this great idea, but I'm waiting to meet a technical co-founder, or I'm waiting to talk to investors to raise funds to go ahead and build it. And it sort of baffled me because I just couldn't understand, if you're so passionate about this idea, why not just build it yourself? It's not that hard to go ahead and learn to code. But then I realized that a lot of the time, these people didn't understand that it's pretty straightforward to go ahead and learn to code if you have a clear path. I can understand that it can be quite overwhelming at the start, but if you have a clear path, you should be able to get there within a matter of months. So that's what I hope to give you guys today. Just as a show of hands, who here is thinking about learning to code but hasn't actually started yet? All right, nice. Who here has actually started learning to code? Awesome. Great. Easy. So let's get into it. All right, so I want to tell you guys a story. Pretty much this one interaction inspired me to go ahead and learn coding. So I want to take you back to July 2021. I met a guy named Rob. Rob is this rich bloke over here, absolutely rolling in the dollars. Rob was a developer. He was a consultant developer. And in his work as a consultant, he'd meet a lot of different people. He became mates with a guy named Tim. Tim was a big business executive at the time. But over the years, they kept their relationship strong. Rob continued his job as a developer. And Tim actually became the CEO of a large company based here in Perth. So when Tim got into this position, he knew that he needed some help with document processing for his staff. So we needed a document processing software as a service, which is a SaaS. What that basically is when a business sort of pays on a subscription base for a service. And he had one customer. So this is Rob wanting to, this is Tim, the CEO, needing the software. So he contacted his mate Rob, who was a developer, and he said, look, if you build this software for me, I will pay you $250,000 a year. I just needed to do this, this, and this. So Rob, being the good developer that he was like, yep, I will build that for you. Bang, smashed it out, and was now making $200,000 per year. So I actually got a chance to meet Rob. This is a true story. Rob's a real person, and he owns a company here in Perth. And I asked him, I said, how much does this app actually cost you to sort of maintain? What's your hosting fee? He said $800 per month. And I was absolutely blown away. I was like, what? You're charging $200,000 and it's only costing you $800 a month. He obviously had a developer employed, so there were more costs involved, but it sort of opened my eyes to the business model of SaaS, which is software as a service, and the sort of money you can make in that, and how you could sort of build something with your own hands that could generate such an insane amount of value. So then I was inspired. I thought, you know what? Wouldn't it be so cool to go ahead and do the same? The only issue was I couldn't code, I had no ideas, and I had no mates.
Still got that, man.
So I made a plan to go ahead and learn to code. I said, you know what? I'm going to learn how to code. I'm then going to get a job as a developer, learn how to develop professional software. And in the meantime, while I'm doing that, if I have any good business ideas, I'll go ahead, test them out, and launch my own SaaS. So that's where I was at that time. So, July 2021, this is where I was. I was 6 months into my first job, fresh out of uni, as a graduate business analyst. I just finished a Bachelor of Commerce. I had a job that I really didn't like that much, to be honest. I just show up to work at a set time. I had to be in the office. I had a set dress code. And I really didn't like the work. It really involved just writing out Word documents. It was a lot of just typing. It was just really boring. I just did not like it at all. So I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm just going to start learning to code. Where do I start? Went on this journey for a couple months, and before you know it, it was January 2021. I just landed a job as a developer with Mechanical Rock. I now have the ability to work from wherever, start whenever I want, finish whenever I want. I don't have a dress code, and I absolutely love the work that I do. So this is me now. So yeah, I'm going to show you guys that you can do the exact same. So hello, my name is Dale. As I stated, I'm a developer at Mechanical Rock, and I learned how to code in 6 months. And I believe that if any of you here were interested in learning to code, you could do it pretty quick and pretty efficiently if you follow a clear path. So here's the agenda for today. I'm going to cover a few main points. First would be, why might you consider learning to code? We'll then go on to, do you have the ability to learn to code? Then on to, what exact language and framework should you learn? And then how exactly do you go about learning that? So let's dig in. Why might you consider learning to code? So I think there's two main reasons why people will learn to code. You have the career reasons and you have the entrepreneurial reasons. So in terms of your career, if you can code and develop software, you're pretty much future-proof. However, now with ChatGPT, we're not too certain about that anymore. You have this sort of flexibility. So you don't necessarily have to work in an office. You can pretty much work from wherever you want to, start when you want. Often you can finish when you want. The pay, in my case, I actually got paid double what my previous salary was. And you have the ability to do things like travel. So in July and August of this year, I'll be working from Portugal. And that's just something working as a developer sort of allows for. You then have the entrepreneurial reasons. So you can sort of test out these business ideas with extremely low risk, right? So zero capital investment. I've launched 3 different apps. All have failed, but I haven't sunk a single dollar into any of them. It's just been my time. Highly scalable. So like we talked about, that guy who was charging $200,000 when it only cost him $800 a month. And you have very high margins. So those are the 2 key reasons of why you may learn to code. And then in the middle there, that's where I sit. You sort of get the best of both. So you can take those entrepreneurial risks on the side, but you also get those benefits in terms of career-wise. Cool. So, do you have the ability to learn to code? I'll say yes, you do. Honestly, I'd say With web development, there's probably other aspects of software engineering that are much more difficult. But if you go into web development, you probably just need to pass year 7. If you know your greater thans or equals and your ifs and thens, you're probably going to be fine. Basic addition, subtraction, multiplication. It doesn't really get harder than that. You really don't need to be super smart to code. I'm really your average Dale, and if you don't believe me, ask anyone with a Mechanical Rock shirt here. They will attest. And if I can do it, then so can you. What I will say is, you sort of need the ability to be able to suck at something, but just keep on going. And it's not only when you're learning, but also in my job as a developer. There'll be something that I'll have to learn and I'll completely suck at it, but I keep on trying. And this is actually the truth. And if you don't believe me, talk to my senior developer, Tim. He sees the code that I commit on a daily basis, and he will agree. I think what matters most is your attitude. So if you believe that you'll get there, you definitely will. You just got to keep going, stay positive, and you will get there. All right, so what exact language and framework should you learn? Before I can answer that question, you sort of need to get the fundamental understanding of these 3 concepts. You've got front end, back end, and hosting. So let's dig into the front end and back end. So here's a high-level web application architecture, and you have 3 components there. You have your client, you have your APIs, and you have a database. So your client is what you actually interact with. Your users actually interact with that part on the front end. So if you're using an application like Gmail, when you go to gmail.com and you see all your emails listed and the button to create a new email, that's you accessing the client. The API is sort of the middleware between the client and other services. For the sake of simplicity, let's just talk about a database here. So let me give you guys a bit of an analogy that will make this easier to understand. So just say life is going really well for you, you're living large like my boss, Hamish, and you're booked into the Crown for the weekend with your Lambo. So you show up to the Metropole and you're like, hey, the valet's there, here's my keys, I'm checking in, could you please go park this? So you're making a request to the valet to go and park your Lambo in the parking lot. Similarly, your front-end client makes a request to your API to go and store some information in your database or go and get some information from your database, right? So in this example, this would be a typical post request, right? Your client will say, take this information and go store it in the database. You're telling the person to take your Lambo and go and store it into the parking lot. Then you've had a lovely weekend and you're ready to leave and check out. You go to the actual valet again and you're like, hey man, I'm ready to go, could I please get my car? So you're making another request, but in this case, you're wanting to actually get your vehicle to leave. So that's a typical example of a GET request, right? You're asking the valet to go and get your car. The valet goes to the parking lot, gets your car, and brings it back for you. So it's the exact same thing in web applications, right? You're making requests to this API to go and do stuff for you. In this case, it's just interacting with a database, but typically it'll interact with a multitude of different services. So this is how it's usually broken down. You've got the front end, which is your client, and then you have your back end, which is your APIs and database. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the front end. So the front end is a user interface, right? It's your look and feel. It's what your users are actually interacting with. This is where you see your text, your buttons, all of the components. That is what the front end is. And I'm going to give you guys a bit of a demo of a little app that I created. Let's have a look. Okay, so this is a very basic to-do app. Right? As you can see, we have a heading here, we have a text field, and we have a very basic button. So what would the code for this look like? All I want you to do is focus on this component right here. So you have a typography element, and that's what's rendering this text. So if we take it away and save that, you can see that it disappears. We can bring it back. Oops. And it's here, right? You can also add some very basic styling to it. So I could change the color of it. So we're changing the color to red. Let's save that. And bam, the color changes. So that's just some very basic front-end code. The other thing I'd like to show you is all this code may look really complex, right? But for example, here, you see that there's a button component, and it looks good. But what I want to show you is, in this day and age, it's so easy, you don't even need to style anything. So I'm using Material UI, which is a styling library, and all I'm doing is copying and pasting the components. So here is Material UI. We have just typed in a button, and we've got 3 different options here. We've got one where it just shows the text, and on hover, it shows you the outline of the button. You've got a contained option, and you've got an outline option. So all I've done is I've just copied this code snippet here that I want the variant contained, and I've just pasted it here. So it's that easy. So just say I want to change the styling to outlined. So I don't want this version of the button. I'll just change this to outlined. And there we go. So I've added a bit of custom styling here, which has changed the border radius in the background. But that's just the basics of how the front end sort of works. It's sort of the styling of your buttons, your text fields, and your texts. The other thing that the front end does that I mentioned was make requests to your APIs, right? So in this case, we're sort of typing your to-do here into this text field, and when we click the button, we're going to trigger an API to go and store this to-do in the database. So this is just a very simple example, don't think too much about it, of a request. So it's going to make a post request, it's going to take your to-do, which is in the text field, and take the date, and it's going to send it to an API. So that's all the front end really does, right? It's the styling and sort of the interaction with your APIs. So let's move on to the back end. Okay, so your back end explained. So I've been using the word APIs a lot. What an API basically is an application programmable interface. Just think of it as an in-between little middleware that goes and does jobs for you, right? You want something, it'll go and get it for you. It does that sort of mid-level calculations and transformations. Typically, your backend also involves a database because you'd want to store data and sort of retrieve data as well. And you also have the ability to interact with a lot of other systems. So that's typically what your backend would be. And the backend for this app, the same to-do app, is over here. So just look at the code that I've highlighted. If you remember, on the front end, it's sending a to-do with a date to this to-do API. Here is the to-do API. It's going to take in the incoming request that has the to-do and the date, create a new object called to-do, and it's just going to store that in the database, specifically in the to-dos collection. So that's a very simple API, which is that middleware that's taking the request from the front end, taking the information you've passed in, and actually storing that into a database. So that's an example of the back end. So I'm going to save add a to-do now, and we'll see this all in action. So here's our database. It's empty. Nothing's here. So let's actually create a to-do. Then do code. To-do created. And if you refresh this database, you'll see that we have a to-dos collection, and we've just added our to-do. So you have learned to code with the date stored in the database. So you can very clearly see that. And if we refresh our app, there's another API that's triggered, which is to get the to-do and render it on screen. So there we have those two sort of calls in one example. Alrighty, so that's the backend demo. Let's continue. Does that make sense so far, everyone? Following? Cool. Easy. So we've covered the front end, we've covered the back end, and typically these are broken down into two sort of separate jobs, if you'd say. You've got a front-end developer who works purely on the client and making those requests to APIs. They're normally really good at styling. And then you have a back-end developer who builds out APIs and configures your database. So which one should you learn? I would say go full stack. So full stack developer does both. That's what I currently do in my current day job. And I'd say if you're doing this for entrepreneurial reasons, you really want to be full stack. You want to be able to actually build your front end, build your APIs, and have a nice database ready to go so that your app can then function on its own. Especially if you're going to go into more management roles within your app, you need to have that understanding if you're outsourcing this work to development teams and stuff like that. You have a much more holistic perspective of how your app will work and sort of how this entire architecture sort of flows. So I think go full stack. All right, now we're going to go on to hosting. So you've got your front end, your back end. Now let's get into hosting. So you've developed your client, your APIs, and your database, which is code. All of this needs to be hosted somewhere, right? So when you actually go and access an application or website on the internet, you're actually getting routed to an actual server. So that application lives on a server, which is pretty much a physical computer. So if you look here on the right, that's typically what it looks like. That's just off movies, but it's a physical computer. And that's often in a data center, but it could also be on premises. So if you work for a big company, they'll often have a server room which will have racks, and it's kept really cold. That's where your app will actually live. The only issue with this is if you go with the traditional server route, you pay like a flat monthly rate for that server, and then it's your responsibility to configure everything else. So what that basically means is that you have the additional overhead of your software and operating system updates, your server patches, and to manage scaling. So not only do you have to develop your client code, your APIs, configure your database, but you also have this headache of managing a server, as well as managing scaling. So let's talk about managing scaling. What does it mean to manage scaling? So just say your startup billion-dollar idea has hit the moon and you have thousands of users, right? But your app may just be like a business app. And people are only really using it from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And if you're in Perth, no one is doing work after 5 p.m. So after that, it dies off. So you've got all these users who need to use your app, and your single server just can't cope with the traffic. So you have to be able to configure these other servers to work well and load balance that incoming traffic. But not only that, you're now paying for 3 servers that are only being used from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. From 5 p.m. onwards, no one is using it. On the weekends, no one is using it. On holidays, no one is using it. But you're paying for all this infrastructure. You're sort of over-provisioned. So that's the typical issue that you'll find with the traditional server. You'll end up paying for things that you may not be using. The alternative model is the serverless model, also known as the cloud native. This is where there's still a server involved, but you just don't have anything to do with it. You let a cloud provider like AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, or GCP, Google Cloud Platform, or Azure, which is Microsoft, they manage the server for you. So you focus your efforts on what matters most, which is writing your client code, deploying your APIs, and configuring your database. You don't have this additional overhead of managing a server, right? They do that for you. The best thing about this is that it's a pay-per-use model, which means that you only pay for what you're using. The other good thing about this is that it scales seamlessly. So what that means is, let's take that same example of your startup getting successful, all these businesses are using it 9 to 5. From 9 to 5, what will happen is it'll automatically scale to deal with that traffic. After 5 p.m., when no one's using it, it'll scale back down. And you're only really paying when you have that high traffic inbound. So from 9 to 5, you're probably paying a bit more because you're paying per request. And then from 5 p.m. onwards, you're pretty much paying close to nothing because no one is using it. I'd say if you're doing this to start your own startup, you want to be lean. So you don't want to be paying for things that you're not using. All 3 apps that I launched that were failures, I didn't pay $1 for them because it was on this serverless model, right? Not many people use them, so it didn't cost me anything. I know for a fact that AWS and GCP have really good free threshold limits. And if you're starting out, if you break that threshold limit and actually have to pay, then that's probably a good sign. Cool. So my recommendations so far have been to learn full stack and go cloud native. So then let's go back to the original question, which is what exact language and framework should you learn? Well, Scott said Rust. Perfect example. A lot of people will give you a lot of different answers depending on who you talk to, and the answer will change, especially depending on where you live. But you guys came to my talk, so I'm going to give you my advice, and this is relevant to the context of Perth, okay? Let's get into it. For front end, this is specifically for web applications. If you're looking at developing mobile applications, you'll need to learn a different framework. I'm a web application developer, so I can only advise you on that. For mobile, just do some research or talk to a mobile developer. But this is for web apps. For your front end, learn React.js. React.js is a framework that consists of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, the reason why I chose React.js is because according to the Stack Overflow survey of 2021, it is the most popular front-end framework, which means that it's used heavily around the world. It's got a lot of developers contributing to it, and there's a ton of packages out there that work really, really well with it. It also means that there's a ton of blogs. There's a lot of free content out there, a lot of great tutorials, a lot of great paid tutorials, and there's just like an overwhelming amount of information on it. ChatGPT is actually trained really well to just give you React code if you ask for it in the right way. So I would say go with React.js. It's very popular. There's a lot of support. And I know that in Perth, it's used a lot. Most SaaS companies now are built with React on the front end. All right. Pretty simple, right? Front end, React.js. What do you learn for your back end? You've got APIs and database there. All right. So for your back end, the API part, I'd say learn Firebase functions. And for your database, learn the Firestore database. So let's dig into Firebase functions. Why have I picked Firebase functions? Firebase functions support a Node.js runtime. So what that basically means, in very simple terms, is that you can write your APIs in JavaScript. JavaScript is the most popular programming language in the world right now. So it's heavily supported. It's pretty straightforward to learn. The other reason why I would recommend this is because, if you remember, with React.js, you've got HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in there. So you're already learning JavaScript for your front-end client, right? A lot of people will learn a completely different framework for the back-end, but then you have to learn two different languages. Why not just use the skills you learned on the front-end with JavaScript on the back-end, right? So you're learning that one language, but you're using it both on the front-end and on the back-end. All right, so why have I picked the Firestore? You'll notice that it's not actually the most popular database to use. It's actually not that popular at all. It's probably like 9th from the top. But the reason why I picked this is because when you're learning, there's so much of like new things for you, right? You're learning how to code in React, you're learning HTML, you're learning CSS, you've got an API. You sort of just want to get a database up and running, right? You just want to be able to store your information and retrieve it. Going with those popular options are great for like long-term scale, but you've got an added layer of configuration that you need to go ahead and do. And that complexity may just be a bit much when you're starting out. For me, it was. I couldn't figure out how to configure this MySQL database and interact with it. It was so difficult. So I'd say when you're starting out, go with the Firestore database. It is extremely beginner-friendly. You can get it spun up with a click of a button, and it takes literally like a minute, and bang, you're ready to go. Hence why I've recommended the Firestore database. It's very easy. There's a lot of great YouTube videos on how to structure it and how to actually configure it, and you'll be off and on your way building your app in no time. All right, for hosting, I've said use Firebase hosting because there's really not much to learn. That's how easy it is. It's literally one command in your terminal, Firebase deploy, and your app is just hosted on the net. I don't know how they make it that easy, but it is extremely easy. So once you've built your front-end React app, you can very easily host that application on Firebase. Okay, so why have I picked Google Firebase? So Google Firebase offers pretty much your back-end services. So you've got your Firebase functions, your Firebase Firestore for your database, and you've got your hosting to actually host your application on the web. You'll notice that AWS is the most popular. And in my day job, I'm a consultant that works specifically with AWS. What I will say is that the same reason as before. AWS is pretty difficult if you're just starting out. The documentation is not very good, and it just requires a bit more configuration. It's nowhere near as easy and as beginner-friendly as Google Firebase. So your main goal when you're learning is to just get something up and running, actually build your own app, right? Once you've got that set and got that foundation, you can go ahead and learn these other cloud platforms like AWS and Azure and stuff like that. But to start off with, Google Firebase is great. And I'm not sure if I stated this, but Google Firebase is part of the Google Cloud Platform. So that's second there. Oops. Okay. So my recommendation summarized is learn React in the front end, learn the Firebase functions for your APIs, and learn the Firestore for your database. So you've got a full stack app that's hosted on the cloud, just there ready for you to go. So, now that you've got these recommendations, you know to learn React in the front end, you know to learn Firebase functions, and you know to learn Firebase Firestore. How do you do this? Do you watch YouTube videos? Do you buy a paid tutorial? Do you go to university? Well, I think when you're starting out, you just need a clear path. I think I've said this a couple times now. You just need a clear path to follow, something that you can stick to and something that you know works, okay? So I used these two resources and it worked for me. I built a full stack application and I got a job as a developer at a software development company. I would recommend you use them. Keep in mind, one of them is a company that I'm not affiliated with. I just recommend to everyone I meet. But yeah, let's see how you go with them. So for front end, there's a QR code at the bottom of that. You basically need to learn HTML, learn CSS, learn React, and learn JavaScript. This will take you to the Scrimba front-end developer path. This is unbelievably good. I've recommended it to everyone I've met. It's the same course that I did. It's $40 per month, and you go at your own pace, right? So that means that, you know, if you want to go slow, it'll take you longer. If you want to hammer it out, you can go quicker. But they don't sort of give you any project. You're not doing any tests or anything like that. There's no assessment involved. It's more, they just provide you with the skills, and it's up to you how you go about applying it. So that's what I would recommend for front-end, the Scrimba front-end developer path. For back-end, your Node.js APIs and your Firestore database, this will link you to a YouTube video. So this YouTube video is 12 hours long. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but this guy goes through in detail how to create these APIs, how to structure your Firestore database, how to set up authentication, and how to actually deploy your application. It's the same video that I used to build my app, and I think it's one of the best I've ever found on the web. So that's the two resources I used. I'll leave that up for another couple seconds if you guys want to take pictures or bookmark those links. And I wholeheartedly believe that these are the only two resources you need. You'd pretty much be on your way to developing a full stack CRUD app with both of these resources. Cool. If you didn't get those links, feel free to come and talk to me after. I'll send them to you. So here's my final tips. Tip 1 will be to actually build a project, specifically a CRUD app. And what that means is your app should be able to create, which means add something to a database, should be able to read, get something from a database, should be able to update, so edit something, and it should be able to delete. If you've covered those 4 components, then you're pretty much doing a good job, right? Build something that you're actually passionate about or something that you find interesting. If you find nothing interesting, ask a friend what app they'd want and just build it for them, or a business. They may even pay you for it. And the key here is to learn just enough to be able to apply it. Don't get stuck like just watching these tutorials just for the sake of completing them. If you feel like you have the general gist, stop the tutorial and go and actually build something. This is not a skill where you like take out your A4 notebook and start writing a whole bunch of notes. Coding is an applied technical skill. So you only really get that skill from actually going ahead and building something. So like I said, don't worry about finishing tutorials to completion. Use Google a lot. In my current job, I use Google for pretty much everything. So does my senior developer. It's just standard in the industry. If you get stuck, you don't need to remember anything, just use Google. Use ChatGPT. This will be a game changer to help you guys learn. It wasn't out when I was learning. But if you get stuck, you need to know how to write a component. You probably know how to prompt it the right way. If you actually do the course, it'll actually generate the code for you. And you use YouTube. And I've given you those 2 resources, but they may cover some things really well, but they may brush over some things that you may need to get a better understanding on. So go ahead and Google them, use ChatGPT, use other resources to get that understanding. And I thought I'd show you guys my project that I built after 4 months of learning to code. And this is more to inspire you because it's pretty bad, and I know you guys will build something way better than this. But it did get me a job at a tech company here in Perth, which is Mechanical Rocks. So just thought I'd show you it. So at the time, I was really deep into coffee, and I had a problem where I couldn't just go and search for cafes based on the quality of coffee. There were always people saying like, oh, the service was bad and the food wasn't good. And I honestly don't care about service or food. All I care about is the coffee. So I wanted to build a platform where people could just go and rate and review their favorite cafes purely for the coffee, right? So I actually got some market validation. I went on a Facebook group and I messaged, it was called Coffee Snobs of Perth at the time. I said, hey, do you guys think this would be a good idea? Would you use an app like this? And I think I got 100 comments, all saying, yes, please build this app. And I think I got like 200 likes. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I'm gonna be rich. Like, let's go. Let's build this. So I started building this app. And you sort of have the ability to look at the cafe, look at reviews. Sadly, a lot of the reviews are just myself. And you have the ability to look at what coffee they're using. I launched this app and only 4 people signed up, which is kind of depressing, but that's okay. But this is just an example of something that I built after 4 months of finishing the Scrimba course and following that YouTube video. So it's a full stack, create, update, delete app, and it does the fundamentals. So this is what you should be aiming for. I think, something like this was an MVP for me at the time. And if you're starting your own startup, I think you'll be in a position to create your own MVP. So I hope that sort of inspires you to give it a go and get started. And here's a bit of a review of what we've covered today. So why might you consider learning to code? You've got those entrepreneurial reasons, low cost, low risk, high margins, and as well as the career reasons. So future-proof career. In my case, it was better pay, but flexibility. Do you have the ability to learn to code? The short answer is yes, you definitely do. What matters more is your attitude. What exact framework should you learn? We covered React.js on the front end, Firebase functions for your APIs, and the Firestore database for your database. And how do you go about learning to code? Like I said, just use those 2 resources as a guide to start off with, and just stick to them, and you will get there. Last but not least, if you need someone who can barely code, like myself, I'm no expert, I'm always happy to help. This will link to my LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me. I'll buy you a coffee. We'll go for a chat. Always keen to meet new people and help wherever I can. And that is it. So are there any questions?
Pass the mic around. Yeah, for sure. You had one?
Yeah. Hey Dale, good speech. Thanks so much for coming along. Take us through a typical day in your life as a developer now, to kind of, give us a sense of what it's like. I'd love to hear about that a bit more. Gets up at lunch. I want the real answer.
Sorry.
All right. I'll use an actual example. Working from home. This is actually like a genuine example. So I'd say I wake up at 9:10. And I'll go brush my teeth, and then I have a startup meeting at 9:15. So 4 minutes is enough to just wash my face. I'll get on camera, have the first meeting and sort of understand what we're working on for the day. Get on to working on that. I'll just talk to a couple people back and forth, so a couple developers. Often it's work related, a lot of the time it's not. Knock off for lunch around about 1, walk around the park, go to the beach, something fun. Come back and continue working until I've finished the task, which is usually 4 to 5. This is a very specific answer because my boss is in the office. So just yeah, just make sure you get your 8 hours in, do the best you can.
What happens when you come to the office?
But yeah, that's a typical day. It's different every day. So sometimes I'm working on an internal project that we're developing a mechanical rock, and sometimes I'm actually working for a client. So the days are often similar. It's usually just a lot of software development, talking with other developers, and a lot of actually just going ahead and solving problems by yourself. And like I said, a lot of it is just Googling things. Even in my job, I still watch YouTube tutorials on how to do things. You often don't know how to do something. The client will ask for something, or a product owner will ask for something, and you have no clue on how it should be done. You just go and talk to people within your organization, or go and search for it for yourself. It's just sort of a lot of problem solving.
So you mentioned you learned to code without ChatGPT. So imagine you started that journey again today with ChatGPT. How much would that cut the time down for you, do you think? Or how much would that impact your learning curve?
Yeah, good question. I think it would help quite a lot because I remember when I was learning to code, there were a lot of simple things that I'd have a dot in my code somewhere and it would be breaking it, but I just did not know what the issue was. So although I was doing the Scrimba course and following it, when I was trying to apply those skills on my own, with my own components and stuff like that, there'd be an issue, but it was really hard to debug and it took me really long. And now you can just copy and paste your code snippet, put it in ChatGPT and say, tell me what's wrong with this, and it will point out the issue for you. So I think you could learn a lot faster. I think the learning curve will be accelerated. It's just that you have to know how to actually use it, right? It's hard to just prompt it with something really broad. You sort of need to know that one, something is wrong, and then the issue is occurring somewhere in this area, if that makes sense. So having that fundamental understanding is quite important, but then using ChatGPT, leveraging a service like that can be extremely beneficial.
Thank you, and thanks for the talk. I think I come from the old coding days where you ran compilers and it took you hours and hours to get something done. I'm quite interested to just understand that Coffee Snob app that you made. How long did that actually take you to get done from start to finish? Just curious for my interest's sake.
Yeah, okay, so that's a really good question. And this is actually something that happened that was quite interesting. So what actually happened was, I was learning how to code. I knew the Scrimba front-end developer path, and I was just thinking of different ideas. And Mechanical Rock said they're looking for developers. So generally in life, I just don't really care to take risks. So I just messaged the director, and I was like, hey, I'm a developer, and I'm ready to go. And he was like, oh, okay, then, well, let's have a chat. So I went and had a chat with him, and he's like, yep, this sounds good, but we need to see if you can actually code. We need to see your technical skills. So he booked me in for a meeting with our CTO, which was 3 weeks ahead. So at that point, I had nothing developed. And I remember talking to my partner. I was like, damn, what do I do? Do I practice JavaScript for the coding exercise, or do I just build something? And then she was like, how confident do you feel with JavaScript? I was like, yeah, look, I can build something, but I don't think I could pass a coding interview because they probably ask difficult questions. So 3 weeks. For the next 3 weeks, I just hammered out that MVP, taking all the skills that I learned, going back to the Scrimba course and stuff like that. And I had built it not only for the Coffee Snobs, but also for that interview. So it's a bit of both. I was sort of thinking of building it, but there was no sort of initial incentive to get it up and running within that time. So the pressure allowed me to build that within 3 weeks. As you can see, it is very clunky, but yeah, that was the total time it took.
Thank you. Great job. Really loved it. Question about how long it actually took during that 6 months. So, 6 months duration, but what did that look like in terms of hours, for example?
Yeah, good question. I would say at that time, I really didn't like my day job, so I was probably doing about 4 to 3 hours a day. I remember I'd wake up at about 4 in the morning and then work on the Scrimba course and practicing stuff till about 7, 8, and then go to my day job. So I was doing that quite a bit, so 3 to 4 hours a day, most days, and it does add up. I'd say development, learning how to code, is an applied skill, so you do need to give it a bit of time. It's not necessarily just rote learning something. It's sort of you get the experience from actually just sitting there for a couple hours and actually building something. So there's about 3 to 4 hours a day. Anyone else?
Any thoughts on no-code tools?
No code? Oh, look, I actually haven't dabbled with them at all, so I can't really give an opinion, but I guess if you don't really want to learn to code, you could go that route. But yeah.
It's thank you very much. Brilliant.
Thank you.
It's interesting how ChatGPT is replacing or maybe replaced Stack Overflow in what you do. I know it's definitely, like you said, I've done the same as you, just copy it, put it into ChatGPT and do it. And even the stuff that, obviously I still think there'll be developers needed in the future, but I definitely think that sort of power will enable a lot more bedroom builders.
My son is learning to code right now, and ChatGPT is coming very, very handy for that. Just accelerating that learning. But that was awesome. So please, one more round of applause for Dale. Thank you very much. I noticed you didn't have a QR code for your podcast.
Oh, yeah. I felt bad.
Dale has a cool podcast. It's called Sassy Founders, so SAASY Founders. Go check out episode 1. It's really, really awesome. Interviews with founders in Perth and how they got started and everything. So very cool. Thanks again, Dale. In 2 weeks' time, we've obviously got the 3 new VCs, so please come and check that out. And in next month, the first Wednesday, we've got Founder Sundowner. Be there.
Yes,
be square.
Definitely come to the next one, because I know that with the first one, they're looking to kick off. They're actually starting to invest from sort of April time, I believe. So,
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think April, May time. Can't put anything in there, any words in their mouth. But I think I get the feeling that we may start to see some
funding,
some actual activity happening.
I'm thinking we might host another pitch session for startups, probably the 2 weeks after we have the VCs. So if you want to do a pitch,
I'm not here.
You're not here that time. Yeah, we're musical chairs. All right, cool. Well, we'll wrap up now. We've got about half an hour of networking. We're going to be throwing chairs around at you and stuff as well, so just dodge out the way. There's some food out the back. Thank you again for Keep Space, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Cheers.